everybody, and welcome back to another exciting edition of TNA Wrestling Impact for June 19th, 2014. And you know what? In wrestling, there comes a time when you start to realize, as a fan and as just a casual viewer, that there are some things that are acceptable and some things that are not acceptable in wrestling. Tonight's show did a halfway decent job of actually capitalizing off of their amazing Slammiversary pay-per-view that they had on Sunday. And I mean, it was a really good pay-per-view. If you missed my review on the TNA Slammiversary, you can go back. It's one of my videos, my previous one actually, and you can check it out. Now, I'm actually going to get down to the show and I'm going to explain to you a couple of things that actually got me really upset. And it's not necessary that they do things like this. You know what I mean? It gets me upset as a wrestling fan. It gets me upset as someone that's aspiring to be a superstar. And I hope that during my journey, I don't encounter nonsense like this. So, we start the show off with MVP, of course, coming out with his crew and basically stating that what happened in the pay per view is not going to happen again and that Young is going to have a match tonight. And his first match was actually against Kenny King. Now, I'm going to be the first to say this was a good match. It was a really good match. It was a good showing by both guys. You got Kenny King. You know, he's a really good athlete. He does a couple of like high spots during the match. He has a couple of nice little kicks going on there. And Eric Young, of course, is a great athlete. They're both doing a really good job in the match. And although it was a short match, Eric Young does win via small package. And mind you, the first match of the night was a World Heavyweight Championship match. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, this is awesome. We start the show off strong, but how are they going to end it? Because that's sort of the way you end a show, right? So I mean, if I were to do a promotion, I would probably make sure that that be the last match instead of the first one. But whatever, it is what it is, right? Moving on. Um, we had our second match after that, which was actually the Wolves versus Austin Aries Samoa Joe versus Willow and Abyss for the TNA Tag Team Championships. Now, this match, it started a little slow in the beginning. It kind of felt like they didn't practice this backstage. They were just kind of like going at it, and I was really getting upset about that because these are all professionals. Some of these guys have been in the game for a long time now. You got newer guys like the Wolves, but then again, you also have Abyss, who's not in very good shape nowadays, and you got Joe and you got Willow, of course, and these guys, they're the veterans of this industry, right? So I expect better from them. I expect them to give me a match that's not like, it felt like they were just going with the motions and they didn't actually rehearse this prior to doing it. Now, towards the middle of the match, started picking up, started getting a lot better, and we started seeing a better showing by all stars. Willow did this amazing high spot when all of the wrestlers were outside of the ring, and he jumps from the top rope, but he doesn't just like do a regular dive. He actually throws himself like back first and just like lands on them, and it was actually pretty neat. That was really good. It had the crowd going. They were chanting, "This is awesome, TNA, TNA." Kind of like the old days. So I was feeling it. I was really digging it, and in my mind, I was like, "All right, this is what we need, right?" Because coming off of that pay per view, you need these type of matches. You need to make people believe again because I love TNA, and to see it in the current state that it's at now, it's really hurtful. You know what I mean? Me being a like pure wrestling fan, but as the match goes on, it starts picking up. It gets really heated. Eventually, the Wolves do retain their belts. They end up winning when they give Jeff Hardy, or Willow in this case, they give him a double team power bomb slash backstabber. That was pretty intense. They even showed a replay of it because it was a pretty good move. So you basically, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a power bomb that leads into a backstabber. So that was a good way to finish the match. It was very high impact, and not like the first match, which I did forget to mention. When EY won the match, he kind of just won with a small package. Like, you couldn't do a pile driver and finish one of your finishers, or an elbow drop from the top rope. Did it really have to be with a small package? Such an underwhelming way to finish a good match, and I guess it is what it is. They kind of made up for it with the second match. Really good, strong showing by all gentlemen. Abyss, he needs to like get in shape because this guy could barely move anymore versus the way he used to move before. Even a couple of months ago, he was like really good, and out of nowhere, he was wrestling in slow motion. You know when you're viewing a tape and you hit the slow-mo button because you want to see how something happened in slow motion. I kind of felt like the way he was moving tonight, and I expect a little more from someone of his caliber. Moving on, we actually had our segment with Dixie Carter and Tommy Dreamer. Yes, we did see Tommy Dreamer back at TNA. They had their little Twitter beef going on because, as we all know, Tommy Dreamer has his independent league, House of Hardcore. And during this time, Bully Ray was actually supposed to be in his main event, I believe, but Dixie pulled him out of the show because she needed him to do an appearance somewhere else. So naturally, Tommy Dreamer got upset, and via social media, he pretty much, described how he felt about her, and Dixie retaliated. So she had him come to TNA, gave him an open mic, and was like, "All right, speak your piece." Now, Tommy Dreamer, man, he's looking a little old nowadays, but good guy all around, man. And I enjoyed his speech. He gave a long speech that took up a good chunk of the show, and maybe like they probably gave him almost 20 minutes on the mic or 15 minutes, but it was a good 15 minutes because it was basically stating what we all feel as wrestling fans and what has happened to TNA, from where they were at before to where they're at now. And Tommy Dreamer was just basically talking about the fact that it feels like she doesn't care anymore and that the fans really do deserve better. And I know this has been a back and forth topic, and then you have your TNA haters out there and you have your WWE haters that think TNA is the best. And in reality, I look at it like this: if you're a wrestling fan, then just respect wrestling for what it is. You know what I mean? It's not the fault of the talent. They do have to follow a creative team that puts together storylines for them and tells them, what they have to do and what they have to say. So if creative does a bad job, that's not really the talent's fault. They shouldn't be faulted for that. But it often feels that way. So you have good, strong. TNA has a really good wrestling roster, but it doesn't often get showcased because of what they make them do and some of the darn right ridiculous things that make these guys do. I feel real passionate about this episode of Impact, and I'm not doing my usual recap. I'm doing more of a review and just the way I feel in general, because I feel that these things need to be addressed in general. And coming off of a strong pay-per-view, I expected better. And honestly, after a very heartfelt speech by Tommy Dreamer, Dixie, even at a moment, she looked like, damn, you're right. And she looked like she was going to cry. Now, whether that was character or off character, regardless of the fact, it was an emotional moment. And Dixie proceeds to hug him, and she knees him in the balls. She knees Tommy Dreamer in the balls. You have a hot crowd in the arena chanting Tommy Dreamer's name. You had them chanting ECW. You have them chanting just wrestling in general. The crowd was really hot for this segment, even though there was no actual action. And Dixie messes up a beautiful moment by kneeing him in the balls, further cementing the fact that nobody likes Dixie and she should just remain backstage and let someone else do the work. So, moving on after that segment, we had another match featuring the Wolves again, because MVP seems to be on this, I'm going to create a double match for anyone with a belt tonight. So Eric Young actually has to defend his belt again against Bobby Lashley in the main event. But before we get to that, we have the Wolves versus Bram and Magnus. Now, this match was actually pretty good. The Wolves were working with better talent in this case. You have young guys like Magnus and Bram, and they were able to showcase more moves. They were moving a lot faster than they were in the previous match. And, it was a good match. It wasn't bad overall. You had a couple of high spots. You had some high-flying moves. But then again, you had Bram and Magnus cheat during the match. And it seems like they didn't even care about the belts. I don't think they should have done that, because the Wolves end up winning via disqualification because they come in with chairs and just throw it in the face of the Wolves. They're just like, pow, here, take that. It kind of felt like one of those old wrestling games where you just you press the A button or the R button and you just throw the chair at them and they just get hit with it. That's what it felt like. And, so you're establishing a tag team with Bram and Magnus, and we don't have that many tag teams in TNA as it is at the moment. So you would think, okay, let's take this a little more seriously. And once again, this is creative's fault, because why not just make them wrestle a serious wrestling match where If they win, they win. If they lose, they lose. But at the very least, they gave it their all. And I understand that they're the bad guys fighting against the good guys, but like at least make it seem like they care. Or if you're gonna cheat in a way that the ref doesn't see it, so that way it doesn't seem like you just don't give a crap, because that's exactly what happened. So they ended a really good match with nonsense again. So after that, we cut to a segment with Gail Kim talking to Taryn Terrell. Yes, Taryn Terrell has returned to Impact Wrestling after a year. I believe she had a baby, or at least that's what she said, and that's why she wasn't around. The crowd was really hot for this, only because when those two ladies were in the ring, they had an amazing last knockout standing match, and then they had a ladder match followed by that. So, on the women's wrestling side of things, they set a standard on that pay-per-view when they fought and they gave it their all. And that's something that the crowd wants to see again. That's something that we as wrestling fans want to see again. We want to see the women get more shine. Come on, let's stop making them filler segments and let's start actually giving them a bigger push. Give them, like, they're wrestlers too. They know how to fight. They know how to do their thing. They don't just have to look pretty. You don't have to put them in evening gown matches all the time. Give them their shine. Let them showcase what they're really capable of. And I think that if they did that a little more often, we'd have better quality overall. I mean, even the talent will be more down to do what they're doing, whether they're getting paid a lot or not, because they're given an opportunity. So anyway, they're interrupted by the beautiful people after Tara Terrell said that she'd like to have another match with Gail to end their trilogy, because they each had a win over the other. The beautiful people come out, and Angelina Love pretty much tells her, hey, you know what? I'm the champ. You ladies are whack and washed up, so you need to get out of my ring. So naturally, the beautiful people attack Gail and Terrell, but the two ladies end up getting the better of the beautiful people, forcing them out of the ring. After that, before our main event, actually, we had a cool little segment with Kurt Angle. He's been waiting around all night for MVP to talk to him. Earlier on in the night, MVP fired Earl Hebner, and his son felt a certain way about that. And, MVP was pretty much like, you need to do the right thing and that if you want to keep your job. So MVP made sure that before the main event started, all personnel, anyone working for TNA wasn't around. He wanted the ref, his own Money, Power, Respect team there, the announcers, and the wrestlers that were fighting in that match, and that was it. But before we even got to that match, Kurt Angle tried to pretty much talk to him, have a conversation with him and tell him, hey, you're basically messing up here. And MVP proceeds by telling him, hey, you know what? I took care of this. I took control of this company on my own. Who are you to come here and tell me what to do? You should be celebrating with me instead. Kurt Angle, of course, declines his offer, and Kenny King, being the loudmouth of the team, tries to sun Kurt Angle, and Kurt Angle he's done. After that, he gets in Lashley's face and he says, what are you going to do? So we cut away from that. Kurt Angle's just badass, and of course, they're going to make him look strong. Even if he's not fighting, they're not just going to have this new kid just get the better of him. And you know what? This is just a prediction from me, but based on the way things are going, it seems like Kenny King is the weak link of that team. So don't be surprised if we get some sort of swerve later on and they turn on Kenny King. So with that said, we move on to our main event of the evening, which is Bobby Lashley versus Eric Young for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Now, again, like I said, even though Young competed earlier in the match, he also is going to end up ending the show defending his belt, because anyone with a belt tonight seems to be fighting, except for the girls, right? So they have a pretty good match. Eric Young obviously has some fatigue on him from his first encounter with Kenny King earlier on. So Lashley is naturally getting the better of him the majority of the match, although Eric Young does pump out some pretty good offense. Eventually, and I hate to say this, but Bobby Lashley catches him with the spear and beats Eric Young, and he is now the new TNA World Heavyweight Champion. This was pretty disappointing. I'm not going to lie. I was upset because you're coming off of a strong pay-per-view where Eric Young overcame the odds, conclusion to a story arc, right? No, because MVP is the focal point of the show. He has to make sure that his team comes out on top. And this is another thing they could have done. Like, why not let's just let Eric win and have another run? Like, why give him such a short run? you ruin the prestige of that title every time you do something like that. First, you had Magnus, who was basically a paper champion. He was a cowardly champ, and he brought down the prestige of that title simply just by never winning clean and needing like 100 wrestlers to win a match. Then you're going to have almost the same thing happen here. You had Eric Young strong. He was defeating every opponent that came to him. And then, suddenly you're going to have Lashley beat him through a degree of shenanigans once again, like we always see happen. I just don't like that they do that, because that's the most important belt they have, and they're not giving it the value that it deserves. So anyway, with that said, before the show ends, as they're celebrating, somebody finally came back. The guy that I've been talking about since I've been talking during these reviews. We get Bobby Roode back. Bobby Roode was in the crowd. He runs in to save Eric Young because they were about to cripple him when they put his hand through one of the chairs, and they proceeded stomping on it. So Roode comes in, makes a save, beats everybody up. Roode looks great. He has a new haircut too. He's kind of rocking one of those, hawks, and he's looking good. I'm glad to see Bobby Roode back. Apparently he was suspended for a month or on vacation, whatever the case may be, however you want to call it, right? But that's what ends up happening, and they both stand in the ring, standing tall, but to no avail, because Bobby Lashley is now the new TNA World Heavyweight Champion. So the bad guy's gonna get the win for this show. My overall thoughts, I think it was a decent show. I'm gonna have to give it a thumbs in the middle somewhere, only because I feel that although they came off of a strong pay-per-view, and instead of capitalizing on that and giving us another great series of matches and bringing back other talent, you had about 4 matches, which isn't bad because they were long matches, but at the same time, there was too much nonsense still going on. And I did like the segment with Dreamer. I did like the segment with Gale and Terrence Terrell, but outside of that, it's just like, come on now, like, give us a show that we want to see for a change. I did enjoy the show again, like I said, but still. Whew. Anyway, you're probably wondering why I'm sweating, right? Yeah, I'm sweating because it's hot in my room, and I'm gonna dab myself dry with this towel real quick. I'm also getting sick, I think. But guys, you've all been great. Thank you so much for the support. My name is The Wizard 411. You can catch me at The Wizard 411. That is my Twitter handle, and you can also catch my Instagram, which goes by the same name. Give me your thoughts on tonight's show. Let me know what you thought. Leave a comment below. You know what I mean? Share this video if you like. Show a brother some support. You already know the deal. And until next time, if you weren't sure about what happened tonight, now you know. You guys are awesome. You don't.